It's round 3 of I, Jamie Stangroom, chatting with he, Ahmed Best. Points of chat include Ahmed's new podcast, play, music and book, why he thinks it's wrong to erase Jar Jar from cinema history, and how I'd like to see Jar Jar go. And by go, I mean die. Ahmed Best, we meet again.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm chilling. It's been a minute, huh?
It has been. It's been many minutes since we last did
Been
this.
many minutes.
And one day we might even go old school and do it like flesh to flesh, cheek to cheek.
In person.
That'd be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That'd be very 20th century.
See, I'm not even sure if you are a real person. You're just this guy I see on the screen. You know, you've shoulders up, nothing beneath.
I'm just a series of photons. I'm light. Just appear like a hologram.
See, I come into these interviews with you enthusiastic, full of joy, because I like chatting to you, I really do. But I come out the other end feeling the opposite, because I ask you what you've been up to, and you've been doing so much, like everything, basically, when I ask you. And yeah, let's let the deflating begin. So I'm at best. What have you been up to?
I've been up to quite a lot. I started a podcast called the Afrofuturist podcast that's on iTunes and on Stitcher. And that's been really exciting because, you know, when you think about the future, we're kind of obsessed as human culture, especially at this time, with the now. Like everybody wants to live in the moment and be here and be present and But human beings have this capacity to imagine what their future is going to be like, whether it's the immediate future or the very distant future. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of Black and brown people don't do this because we're in situations in which we're constantly trying to get ahead in a way that helps us sustain the now, right? So I figured that it would be a really good time to talk about Afrofuturism, which is a term that I didn't come up with. Those ideas have been going on for quite a long time. There's a really good book called Black Genesis that really explains where all of the ideas from the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment came from and how they migrated from Egypt up to Italy and France and so on and so forth. So Afrofuturism starts, you know, the idea of it starts roughly around 8,000 years before ancient Egypt and continues there. So a major part of it as well is art. A lot of times when we talk about science and we talk about technology, we don't talk about art. And one of the main staples in Afrofuturism is like the artists help establish the technology. So if you think about things like the tricorder in Star Trek or the communicator in Star Trek, right? The communicator was this fantastical thing that Captain Kirk taught Spock with, right? But now we all have them. And it's kind of like that idea, you know, where art really dictates what's happening now, what's happening next. So on the podcast, I talk to artists, I talk to technologists, I talk to futurists who think about 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years into the future and what we're going to look like. So that's one of the things that I've been doing.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that. I mean, you said you didn't invent the name, the term, but where did you? You've admitted to that. You're not claiming it. Where did you come up with the idea for the podcast? Though, was there something out there already that inspired it, or was it actually the gap that inspired it?
Well, I wanted to talk. You know, I love talking about the future, and actually, Star Wars was a big catalyst for that for me as well, because, you know, Jar Jar was a character that had never been done before, and I had an intimate working relationship with all the animators and George Lucas, and we kind of created this hybrid technology that is now pervasive. It's it's ubiquitous in the entertainment business. George was always a bit of a futurist. He always had this, you know, risk-taking part of him for what was coming next. Like he always really focused on 20 years from now, you know? And I always liked that about him. And he really got me thinking that you can actually affect the future if you start thinking about it in a very real way. So I've always thought about the future in a very real way. And I was thinking about starting a podcast, and I called my brother-in-law, Aram Sinreich, who is PhD over at American University in communications. And I was talking to him. I was like, look, I want to do this podcast. I want to do it about the future. And he was like, well, you should really check out the Afrofuturist movement and all the stuff that's going on. And at first, I didn't want to do it because I don't really like this idea of a homogenous kind of Afro term, because I want my viewership to be people who are interested in the topic and not interested in the topic because it's Black. I'm not really big about the whole compartmentalizing things. But then my brother-in-law hooked me up with this guy named Dr. Lonnie Brooks at Cal State East Bay out here on the West Coast.
I've heard that name before because I've listened to the podcast.
Boom. So Lonnie and I had a conversation for like 2 hours, and it was all the geeky, nerdy stuff that I like to talk about when it comes to the future. And because he's there, he's in Silicon Valley, he knows the people, he is a futurist, and he teaches futurism. He's involved a lot with all these people. So after I got off the phone with him, I was like, this is it. This is the podcast. This is what we're going to talk about. And Afrofuturism is a very good foundation to start from. And then from there, we just branch out.
And you mentioned you brought up Star Wars. You were the first to bring up Star Wars. It was you brought Star Wars up earlier. And actually, I don't know if this is something you thought about, but in your opening monologue for the first episode of the podcast, you're straight out with the Star Wars connection, but you bring it home within the podcast. It makes sense. Did you get a taste for like the hosting side of things from your Star Wars day? And I asked that because you did the featurettes, didn't you? The behind the scenes interviews with Hayden.
I did. I loved that stuff. One of my, as a kid growing up in New York, the Tonight Show was a big deal, right? So I loved the Tonight Show. I loved Johnny Carson, and then eventually, David Letterman, Arsenio Hall, Charlie Rose, and a really silly dream of mine was to have like a Charlie Rose-esque roundtable talk show where I could just sit with a book and talk to the author. It's so cheesy and corny, but I would love that. I mean, if I could do that, that would be just amazing. I love that.
You can do anything you want now. The internet's there.
I know, right? I would
get yourself a table and a book.
Right. I need a room with a black curtain, a table, and an author. But I loved hosting because I just like to. I'm interested in pretty much everything. You know what I mean? I love the intricacies of process. I love how people put things together. I don't know how everybody does it, and I'm interested not only because it's fascinating to me, but I love to like glean things off of people. Like one of the biggest interviews I had with the behind the scenes stuff in episode 2 was I talked to Trisha Bigger, who did all Amidala's costumes.
Okay.
Right. So, in the finished product, you see Natalie wearing all of these elaborate, beautiful, ornate pieces. So Trisha was a very humble, very unassuming Scottish woman. And she had a workshop of all of these, people just making all of these clothes. So I talked to her in the featurette and I was like, how do you do this? Like, where do you get all these ideas from? Like, where did it come from? Where do you get the materials from? And she was like, it comes from a bunch of different places. She said one of Amidala's dresses was an old tablecloth. She just really liked the lace pattern in this tablecloth. So she took the tablecloth and just created an entire look out of it. And I just thought that was fascinating. I thought that was fantastic. And, a lot of this behind the scenes stuff, like everybody was looking at the sets and they wanted me to talk to all the other actors. They wanted me to talk to Hayden. They wanted me to talk to Natalie and stuff like that. And that was cool. But what was even more cool to me was talking to like the production designer and talking to, people who do like the gaffers and the riggers and the electrics people, because those are jobs you can train for and get. and they are just as important and just as creative to the process as being an actor on the show. Like, at the end of the day, as an actor, we are the last line of defense, right? Everything else has to be done. You have to have the story, you have to have the design of the movie, you have to have the set, you have to have the costumes, you have to have all of these other things, and then you put the actors in them. So in the army of making movies, the actors are your last line of defense, right? All of that other stuff is just as glorious, is just as gratifying, and it feels just as good to see that on screen as it does an actor's performance. I used to go to a lot of the ILM screenings for the prequels, and every time, and there was an army of them cats, right? But every time you go to the ILM screenings, they're watching the movie in a different way. You know, they're looking for the seams. They're looking for what's out of focus. They're looking for what's believable, what's non-believable. They're looking for what animation was actually there and what they created, right? And that's what was exciting to them. They were just like, oh, that plant is real. That one I made, you know. I talked to one of the software engineers who was just like, I worked on your hand for 3 months, just your hand, for 3 months. And it looked like he was about to hit me or kiss me. I don't know what was going to happen. But that kind of stuff I like. So having kind of a sit-down talk show and talking about the intricacies of process was one of my biggest dreams. So yeah, I dig the hosting thing. I just don't want to host like, you know, some reality show like that I don't have any interest in. You know, I never wanted to be a host for money. I always wanted to be a host for what I found to be interesting.
Gob on a stick, I call it.
Yeah, I was never interested in that. Is she going to date him for the? So I never did the professional host route because I want to do that. You know, I want to do things that I'm interested in.
The Star Wars connection with the podcast, the way you brought it out in the in the opening monologue for the first episode was great because it wasn't like a name drop. By the way, I was in Star Wars, you know, the biggest franchises of all time in movie history. You actually you brought it home to the podcast because, as you mentioned at the start of this interview, it's about the future technology, and you were part of a very special moment in filmmaking time. You know, in that role as Jar Jar.
Yeah. I think that's really important to know. You know, a lot of people think I was just a voice actor, and I don't think that's fair. You know what I mean? I don't think that's fair to not just to me, but I don't think that's fair to the process of filmmaking. You know, regardless of whether you loved Jar Jar or hated him, he was important in the canon of what was coming next, right? Episode 1 dropped in 1999. That's, you know, the last year of the 20th century.
Yeah, man.
And here was this pioneering process that pretty much took over the 21st century, right? To slight everyone involved or to not be aware of the history of that. And I have to say Lucasfilm is partially to blame here as well. Because I don't think they focus too much on the process of making the character. And I think that is what should have been the star when we were talking about Jar Jar. Everyone was just playing catch up from the backlash. And although I understand that, I think the converse argument to it is filmmaking has changed and we changed it. And the reason why you hated the character was because the process was successful. You believed that this character existed. Mm-hmm. And that process takes an actor and it takes the animators. And there is a symbiotic relationship that has occurred that has now changed movies. Even now, there's this rift between animators and Andy Serkis. And it has nothing to do with Andy Serkis. You know what I mean? Like, Andy Serkis's performance, which is absolutely brilliant, enhances the technology that he's connected to. It's this wonderful symbiotic relationship. But we still haven't gotten the narrative right. We still are talking about how, no, it's the animators. No, it's the actor. And the animators and the actors are creating this character together and they just want to make stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to be, as, viewers of this thing, as lovers of this thing, as cinephiles, we have to be accurate in how we talk about it and how we perpetuate the ideas. That's up to us. That's up to the fans of the thing. That's up to the writers and the critics of the thing. We have to be better about that.
You mentioned perhaps there wasn't enough focus on the process of Jar Jar and the physicality of Jar Jar, which was you with the technology. I guess to the casual film fan, they would credit the birth of that technology to Gollum.
Yeah. We shot in 97, which was, I think, about 2 or 3 years before Lord of the Rings actually started. But I have to say, like, where we fell down, Peter Jackson and Weta learned from. And the reason why Gollum was so successful was because they understood what happened with Jar Jar and they corrected. You know what I mean? As well as having a phenomenal actor in Andy Serkis and phenomenal story with J.R.R. Tolkien.
What do you think those corrections were?
They knew how to market Gollum the right way. When Gollum came out, Peter Jackson was like, Andy Serkis's Gollum. Dead up. It was Andy's performance, right? So everybody locked on to Andy Serkis as the actor, right? I did not have that. Everybody's talking about Jar Jar, Jar Jar, Jar Jar, Jar. They weren't talking about me, the actor, playing this character, right? So they were talking about Peter Jackson was just like made sure Andy Serkis was at the front of it, right? Which gave Andy Serkis a career, and then, Peter Jackson did King Kong and Andy Serkis was in that. And then subsequently, Andy was directing second unit on The Hobbit, I believe. I think he directed second unit on Return of the King and then on The Hobbit. Yeah. But I might not have that correct.
And he's got his own studios now in West
And then he has
London,
the Imaginarium. Yeah. Yes. He has the Imaginarium. And because he was able to have a career as this guy, he's able to perpetuate the technology. Right. And subsequently was asked to do more. I was never asked to do anything else after Jar Jar. Right. Because no one knew who I was. When I was done, I would go out and I would try to get work, and people were just like, "Wait, that wasn't a cartoon. That wasn't you." Like, no, it was actually me. I was in there. No, that wasn't that. It was an actor in that. And at the time, there were no behind the scenes DVDs out, and I couldn't be like, "Look, it was me." See. But Andy Serkis is credited with being the first, and he wasn't. And it's good that he wasn't, because the first one through the gate always gets the bloodiest. So I took all the hits.
Would you like another go at the technology itself?
Absolutely. I mean, the technology was what I was super excited about. The fact that we can make these things work and the technology has changed so much, since the spandex and the ping pong balls.
Yeah.
I've been directing a lot of AR and VR, independent AR and VR projects, and I'm working with a friend of mine, Jesse Gilbert, who's a computer scientist, and we're hacking the Xbox Kinect, and we're doing mocap with the Xbox Kinect. No spandex, no ping pong balls, live tracking of human individuals creating live animated characters. It's incredible. Like the stuff that ILM needed with me in a room full of computers, you can do with an Xbox Kinect.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, it's a phenomenal progression, and I'm glad to be a part of it. You know what I mean? Really, really glad to be a part of it, and I would love to continue it in some way, shape, or form.
Just for a moment, let's talk about music. I touched on it earlier with the podcast because you've done the production there in terms of the sound, haven't you?
Yeah.
We've talked a few times in the past. We've collaborated as well with DJ
Yeah.
Starfaker. What's the latest?
DJ Starfaker. DJ Starfaker is writing a new record that's coming out. It's called Man of Focus.
Man of Focus.
Man of Focus. DJ Starfaker. Man of Focus. And I'm currently writing and recording some new tracks for that. And I will be doing some live looping events as well with that music. So right now, the writing phase, I just lock myself in a room, in this room, and come up with a bunch of ideas. Then I get a bunch of guests to come in to, help me realize it. And then I'm going to go out. I haven't toured in a very, 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 very long time.
The time has come
So
then, isn't
I
it?
want to try to get a tour together, maybe for next summer or something. So I got to hurry up and finish this record.
And would this be in the States, or are we thinking global, baby?
I want to do global. I've always, I lived in London for quite a while, and I always loved, like, the Glastonbury Festival, like all the European festivals.
You did Glastonbury?
Happen. I did Glastonbury when I was here.
Wow.
So I love all the European outdoor summer festivals. I want to do like a whole bunch of that.
We touched on your podcasting, music, writing, producing. Am I right in saying you're directing a play in LA at the moment?
I'm directing a play right now with a bunch of amazing actors. So it's just a joy every rehearsal. The play is called The Tragedy. It's going to be, it's opening November 10th at the Zephyr Theater on Melrose in Hollywood. And lead actor is Malcolm Barrett, who is on a show called Timeless. Play was written by this new playwright. It's a world premiere, this guy named D.G. Watson. And it's a play that has a lot to deal with what theater is. And it's funny because, doing the VR work that I've been doing, what VR actually does is it recreates a theater experience. And the funny thing is, like, the big conversation in VR is how can we make this communal? How can we all, are there going to be theaters where people are sitting in rows and putting VR glasses on? The answer is no. There's not. VR is not meant to be communal, because the real question is, how do we make money? But VR is meant to be you in your underwear in your house, walking through a planet. The communal VR experience is going to a play. So if you want a communal VR experience, put clothes on and go to a theater.
Yeah.
But this play talks about this idea of what is an immersive experience. How do you lose yourself in the experience? So we play a lot with what we call the fourth wall. And the fourth wall is this thing that, if you're not in theater, the fourth wall is the wall between you and the audience.
Yeah.
Right. The audience can see you, but you can't see them. In this play, we shatter the fourth wall so we get to see the audience. And it's something that Stomp did actually very well. Stomp had this amazing ability, and me and Kamal talk about this in the podcast because Kamal was in Stomp. But Stomp had this amazing ability to accept the fourth wall, accept the audience into the show, and then cut them off, right? So they were still watching, but they weren't a part of. We brought you in, and then we kicked you out. It was very English that way. You know what I mean? It was just like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Kind of, street busking
Attitude.
kind of fear. It's very like, we can be self-deprecating, but we can also be extremely arrogant and stuff. So I had a lot of experience bringing audiences into theater productions through Stomp. So I'm trying to do this now with a straight play, and it's been really fun. It's been really challenging, but it's also been really fun.
All these different things. Do you actually have a schedule that allows you to balance them all, or is it like each day is kind of mood dependent?
No,
in terms of what you actually tackle.
I have to have a schedule. I am a time schedule fanatic. I have to have it. My wife isn't, which
Right.
drives me absolutely crazy. Because she's more of a spontaneous, like, oh, let's do this today. I'm like, I can't do this today. I'm on a crunch. I'm on a time crunch. But, it's one of those New York things that, time is a big deal in New York, and LA not so much. But I was thinking about this the other day. I really love time. Like, I really love time. I like focused time. I like allotted time. I like showing up on time. Like, there's a whole bunch. I like the, time travel, the theory of relativity I'm really into. There's a whole bunch of stuff about time that I really dig. I really dig time. And I think time is special and precious. And like we were saying at the top, like, we all get the same 24 hours. So
We do.
it's really this special thing that can, like, make or break you. So yeah, I try to stick to my schedule as much as possible.
The time is fascinating. I'm easily pleased, to be honest, and I'm just excited by the fact that I'm currently in the future talking to you in the past.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
I'm 8 hours in the future. What's all that
8
about?
hours ahead.
Yeah.
You
Well, some say ahead. I say the future. That's the way I brand it.
I always say the future too. Like, when I'm in a time zone, it's a few. I always call. I'm like, hey, babe, I'm in the future.
I've got a few questions for you from subscribers. I didn't actually think we would touch on Star Wars like we have already. We did this last time, and it was very popular.
Oh, cool.
So I reached out to the subscribers again to send in their questions, and I literally couldn't. Obviously, I literally could have written them all down. I just didn't. There was too many. So I've picked out the best ones, and to be honest, it just saves me having to do any preparation and work, Ahmed. So I've got a few here. Vintomania and Wolfgars. These are like YouTube names. I'm presuming these aren't their kind of birth names.
That's not a real name.
Cool parents, if weird parents, if so. But yeah, these are YouTube sort of. Do we say handles on YouTube?
Yeah,
do we say that on YouTube as well?
YouTube handle.
Well, they both ask about conventions and your experiences, and would you ever do them again? And Vinto particularly wants to know if you do a UK one.
Yeah, I'm not a big convention guy. I've done conventions before. I did a UK convention, as a matter of fact. For me, and this might make me crazy, but I feel weird charging people for my autograph. I just feel weird about it. And I completely understand why people will pay for an autograph. It's a transaction. It saves them from, their social anxiety. They don't want to come up to me in the street and be like, hey, can I have an autograph? Here's $25. I paid my $25, give me my autograph. Now I don't have to be social. I'm cool with that, right? I completely understand that. But, like, me wanting my Charlie Rose talk show, I'm much more interested in you as a person than I am in a transaction. And I've never been a guy to do anything for money, really, although I've done things for money. Some things I'm not proud of.
Really. Have we got time for that now?
That's a whole nother show. But I think I'm much more interested in the human interaction than I am in the financial transaction, and that's why I'm not big on the convention thing.
Apart from the transaction, did you enjoy the experience there, meeting people?
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was long. It's a long, long, long day. But yeah, it's fine. It's just not for me. That's just not my preference.
This is Pagrec, I believe, Pagrec. And I'm going to ask this question, but I'm not sure. I mean, who am I to know anyway? I'm not sure how accurate it is. It's probably very accurate.
Yes.
Pagrec would like to know about you standing in as the pre-CGI Yoda in Attack of the Clones. Was that a thing you did?
Yes.
Really?
I did. I was Yoda.
Can you just say that again, please?
I was Yoda.
Wow.
I was Yoda. I was actually Yoda, Jar Jar, and random guard all on the same day, all at the same time, all in the same takes. So
okay,
it was weird. It was a weird day. Like I did Yoda a few days. I did Yoda on the day where Ewan was talking to the Padawans, looking at the star map. I was Yoda on that day. And then I was Yoda on the days where we were in Palpatine's office. And then I was Yoda in one of the walkthroughs. But Frank Oz couldn't make it to Australia in time to do Yoda. And so they needed somebody to read Yoda lines. And George was like, yeah, Ahmed will do Yoda. And I was like, huh? And then he was like, you can do Yoda, right? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I've been doing Yoda since I was a kid. And so I was Yoda for a few days.
And you were doing the voice, I presume.
Yeah. I was doing the voice. I was doing all of it. Everybody was like, wow, you can do Yoda? And like, we all can do Yoda. We've been doing Yoda since the 70s.
Well, I don't know, Ahmed, because I've not heard you do it yet. So hint.
I don't know if I could do. My voice has changed.
This is Skywalker 11386. Did you ever get to meet John Williams, and are you a fan of classical music in general?
I'm a huge fan of classical music. I studied classical music composition at Manhattan School of Music, as well as jazz and contemporary music. So big classical fan. I did meet John Williams. I got to sit in on all the recordings of the score of Episode 1 at Abbey Road. And when John Williams was conducting, everybody was in the sound booth listening to the mix. And I was like, hey, can I go in the actual room and listen to the orchestra live? And they're like, oh, yeah. So I set up a little chair like in the corner of Abbey Road in the studio, and I was there watching John Williams conduct the orchestra and the choirs and stuff, and it was amazing.
That is once in a lifetime, or 3 times in a lifetime for you. With I guess
thrice.
thrice in a lifetime.
It's a thrice in a lifetime experience.
This is a bit of an in joke with my my subscribers. Are you a fan of Jizz? Now I'll explain. This is in the context of John Williams. You know the cantina music in the original Star Wars film? Mm-hmm. According to Wikipedia, the Star Wars Wikipedia, that's known as Jizz, apparently. That's the name of the genre, intergalactic jazz.
Intergalactic jazz. I'm a fan of Jizz as not only a listener, but as a producer of Jizz.
You've produced Jizz?
Oh, man, sometimes 3-4 times a day.
Wow. We'll move on then.
Yes.
So this is, I think, Wuttini Yuntini, which I think is a noise the Jawa makes, but it doesn't sound like what I just did. If you were to go back in time to do Phantom all over again, what would you change, if anything?
Change in Phantom? That's a good question. Nothing. I wouldn't change anything. There is nothing to change it to. There really hasn't been anything like it. And the choices that were made were choices that I think stand, the test of time. Like I said, love it or hate it, you believed it and it existed. So I really wouldn't change anything. And it was such a wonderful experience, me and one of the great experiences were just me telling jokes with Liam and Ewan and Natalie, just sitting around laughing. We just laughed a lot,
No, you can't change good memories, can you, really? But you shouldn't.
No, not at all.
Captain Sam, do you enjoy the new Disney Star Wars films? Why or why not?
They're okay. It's very difficult for me to answer this question because I have an ultra informed opinion about it. Like I am not just the average Star Wars fan. I grew up with the movies. I was in the movies. I'm a student of film and cinema. Went to film school. My father's a filmmaker. I'm very good friends with George Lucas. So I have a really super informed opinion about them. I've lived in Hollywood for 17 years now. I know how the system works. They're okay. They're not easy for me to watch. Because hard part about being in a Star Wars movie done by George Lucas is he really does things that he believes, right? He has an incredible conviction behind every decision that he makes. That's not the way Disney does movies. Disney does movies in a way that has to please stockholders and that has to please a wide swath of people, a huge general audience, right? So you're only going to get things that are as risky as that number of people. George only cared about pleasing himself. And when you have that, you have a person who has a point of view that, regardless of what you think, they are going to take the risk to do it, right? So the reason why we have A New Hope and Empire and Jedi, and the reason why they are movies that everyone seems to love en masse, let's not even go to the prequels. The reason why those movies are what they are is because George said, I don't care what anybody thinks, this is what I want, right? This is what I want. Not what the general public wants, not what the studio wants, because he did the movies independently and then sold them to 20th for the prequels. This is what I want. And I appreciate filmmakers who have that type of vision. I appreciate filmmakers who really go out on a limb and take a risk. With these new movies, these filmmakers are different, right? They're not George Lucas, right? And I think JJ Abrams is actually the perfect director for all of these movies. And the reason is because JJ Abrams is a really, really, really great DJ. And that's the time that we're listening to right now, right? And I love great DJs because great DJs play the records that keep the party going, right? And there is a place for great DJs, right? Sometimes your favorite artist made a record that you don't like, but they took the risk to make that record. Like, I'm a huge Prince fan. There are some Prince songs that I'm just like, I don't know, homie. I don't know what you was on that night, but that wasn't it, you know? But I'm still a Prince fan because Prince still made the record and put it out, right? People who play Prince records are great. People who are, if somebody says, if Questlove was like, I'm DJing and I'm a DJ an all Prince night, I'm there. I love it. You know what I mean? But is he Prince? No. He's not doing what Prince does. So the difference between the Star Wars movies now and the Star Wars movies that George did are the difference between a really great DJ who gets the party started and your favorite artist who makes records.
But on one hand, Rogue One was quite un-Disney-like. I mean, just for the simple fact that they killed the entire main cast, didn't they?
Yeah, but I would say Rogue One was a really good remix of a Star Wars movie. You had a movie. It had a lot of problems in it. Rogue One, in my opinion, there were too many people. I really didn't. I couldn't focus on somebody to really like. And then Donnie Yen was a Jedi who wasn't a Jedi. He was kind of a not Jedi, a blonde not Jedi. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't really understand the mythology of how this movie went, and I think it was because there were too many cooks in the kitchen. Disney writes by committee, and you don't have a one-person vision of it. Was it about the girl? Was it about the Spanish dude? Was it about the father? Was it about the not Jedi? Was it about there was just so many different was it about that never came to this one cohesive story, which was we got this information. It goes, right to A New Hope. We got this information from people who sacrificed their lives. Who are these people? This is who they are. This is where they come from. Biggest question in my mind about Rogue One was, why was Forrest Whitaker in the movie, and why did he have metal feet? You know what I mean? Like, he finds her, now he's on a planet, he can't breathe, and he's half cyborg. Like, why?
Is that
And it's
setting
not a
up
why.
another spin-off though?
Right. It's not exactly. It's not a why that I'm like, oh, this is stupid. It's a why that I'm just like, well, let me know tell me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that, I teach my writers when I do a writing class is, don't be coy with what's going on. Tell me what's happening. I'm with you. Like, I want to know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't want to be surprised.
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on. If I'm supposed to visualize this story as an actor and as a director, don't leave me out of it. You know what I mean? I'm going to be a part of this thing.
Well, we might get the origin of those metal feet one day.
I hope so. I thought everybody in that movie had an interesting introduction. It just never went further than that.
So that was Captain Sam's question, and it leads into a question I've asked you before, but some time has passed. However, I don't think your opinion will have changed, especially after what you just said there. And Jamie Armstrong Hitchings, which I believe is a real name. That sounds to me like a real name.
Yeah, that's real.
Straight
Wait, hold on
up
a second.
that
I
one.
have to switch headphones.
So we've just had a little technology switch with Ahmed's headphones.
Tech
switch has finished. So yes, it's a question I've asked you before, but some time has passed. I'll ask it again, even though I don't think the answer will have changed. Would you like to be in another Star Wars film?
No. I'm good.
You said no to me a good year or two ago, and I just wondered. Yeah, now it's alive again. Had that changed? But
no, it hasn't changed. Number one, I've never been asked. Which, I would have liked to have been asked, even though I said no. I'd like to say no. But, Andy Serkis was in Force Awakens. And I was like, why? I mean, I know why, because he's great. Like, I love Andy Serkis. But you are doing all of this to bring all of these original folks back to the fold. Why not ask the guy who was the originator of the thing that you're asking this guy to do, especially since I'm in the family? You know what I mean? But, I think Lucasfilm is, especially now that it's Disney, has made a very strong effort to distance themselves away from Jar Jar and me subsequently, that no one even thought to ask me. But probably not. Like, I think Star Wars now is something very different. And I think what it was when I did it was something very, very special. And like I said, I wouldn't want to change that experience. I really enjoyed that experience. And I'm off. I really want. I got to do my own thing now. I gotta make my own, canon of movies. So I'm much better on this side as a watcher, as a fan, and as an occasional critic.
Even if it was to come back as a completely different character and really have a go at the technology again, would you still decline that?
Yeah, I would, because regardless of what I do, even if it's non-Star Wars related, I'll never be able to move past Jar Jar Binks. He'll always be a part of my life. On some days, I'm actually writing a book about my experience right now, and because people keep pestering me to write a book, and I've been saying no for 20 years about writing a book about it. But I have started, among all the other things that I do, I have started writing a book about, what I went through and all of this, and I'm hoping that could answer a lot of the questions that people are itching to ask me about my experience with it. But very few people have been able to escape the lure of Star Wars. And as an artist, I believe as an artist, I have to keep moving.
I think that brings me on to this final question now from one of the subscribers, which is from Sant Fam. And he brings up Jar Jar's fate after Revenge of the Sith, but actually, we now have canon fate for Jar Jar after Return of the Jedi. Did you see that, and what did you make of it?
Is that the one from the book?
It's from the book, yeah. So it's Chuck Wendig's novel, Star Wars Aftermath, Empire's End.
That's the one in the fountain, and you know, it's a very somber, very dark eventuality for Jar Jar. Yeah, I quite liked it actually. It was really dramatic, and I think a good idea to kind of sum up. I always complained to George, like when I realized that, you know, Sith was not going to have Jar Jar in it pretty much, and they were moving very, very far away from me. I always complained to George that I didn't get a good death. I wanted to like really be just hacked to pieces in some kind of way, you know, and George wouldn't do it. So and the interesting thing I think about Jar Jar is everybody keeps looking for an explanation for him, which is, you know, human nature. And, you know, I'm going to have a big part of my book talking about why this is what it is, because I've thought a lot about it. And I like all of these theories that try to explain the reasoning for Jar Jar. You know, we talked about the Darth Jar Jar, I think, before, and then this one where, you know, he becomes this tragic character who's realized he's been manipulated and loses his mind. And everybody's trying to come up with this reasoning. You know, everybody's trying to come up with a finality for him. And in that effect, I think it's cool. I think that's interesting. And I quite like from a storytelling perspective, and as someone who does that, you know, for a living, I really find that interesting, and I find the impetus for it interesting as well, like why human beings are really trying to figure out what this Jar Jar thing was all about. So yeah, it was cool.
It is amazing, isn't it? A character that divided opinion so much, yet people just don't want to let go of him, do they? Really?
I've been trying to let him go for so long, but there is something out there in the zeitgeist of the Star Wars universe. They want to keep him around. They want to forget about him. They hate him, but they just want to keep him around. I don't know why. I get, you know, Twitter messages every day about, is Darth Jar Jar real, or is he really a Sith? Was this the thing? I have a bet with my friend that he was. Are you going to be in the next episodes? It blows my mind. All the hits I've taken over the years for Jar Jar, people still care. It blows me away.
And the Darth Jar Jar thing, people really, really have invested in it. You know, there's a whole Reddit feed on it, and they really want it to be a thing. I mean, that was a question I was asked by a lot of people. We've discussed it already, so I'll put a link to that previous interview in the description.
But here. I think that's really a testament to the process. You know what I mean? I think that's the reason why we have to say that the process is symbiotic. It's both animators as well as actors, because all of the martial arts stuff that came out, that was from me. You know, I've been a lifelong martial artist. I'm a mover. I was hired to play Jar Jar because I was a mover. So a lot of those moves came from, you know, the martial arts. And it's so interesting that it just kind of seeped through enough in the animation that people were just like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? But I think that is a testament to the process. I think that's one of the reasons why these CGI characters have been so successful, because you do need both. You know, it's not just animation and it's not just acting. It's this brand new thing.
We were asked about Giddy. I mean, he or she, actually, is Giddy followed by a load of numbers. I'll just put them on the screen. He or she's asked, what fate would you have liked to have seen come from that direction? And I believe it's the Darth Jar Jar direction. I mean, how far did you have in your mind a story there?
No, I didn't.
Because everyone else has, it seems.
Everyone else believes it. He's Snoke. And da, 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 da. It would have been interesting if Snoke was some sort of a shape-shifting, powerful Jedi that could influence, in that way. Like if he turns up as Jar Jar, then he turns up as, Mace Windu, and then he turns up as Snoke. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that would have been something interesting, But no, I didn't have anything in my head about it.
Well, I like what you just released from your head there. That could be a thing, That could be a thing. I don't think we know who Snoke is still, so it's a possibility. But I mean, in some ways, you've got canon closure to the character now, or people should have at least.
Yeah.
Do you think that's quite cool?
I hope so. I really like that. I like I said, I've always felt like Jar Jar's fate was too open-ended. I would have loved to have closed it in some way, I remember I saw something where JJ Abrams said something to the effect of, you'd see Jar Jar's bones in a desert in Tatooine. And I was like, well, you just opened up a whole nother can of worms. That wouldn't be an end. Everybody would be asking the question, well, what happened to him to get to Tatooine?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he'd have to come up with a story for that. So I think everybody wants some kind of a Jar Jar closure to happen, including myself. And I think that's cool. I think that should happen. I think that'd be great.
And I think the book would go a long way to that as well, really.
Yeah, I mean that'd be closure. It's very cathartic doing it, like writing it, and it's great closure for me. Because in the book I really talk about why and how I figured out why everybody was so disturbed by it. You know what I mean? And I'm not focusing really on the people who love Jar Jar because that's easy, but focusing on the people who didn't. And why, and it really made me ask a bunch of questions that took nearly 20 years to answer. But it's really turned into a book more on human nature than anything else.
Is it an easy write?
No, it's not. It's not easy because I have to talk about myself, and I hate that. But it's really based off of this thing that I teach when I talk about narrative and when I teach writers, actors, and directors how to come up with stories. The experience with Jar Jar really helped me develop a method, and it really kind of ignited my passion and kind of the underlying thing of why I do what I do and craft and process is because I want everybody to be better at telling their stories, whether it be on Instagram or whether they write a book or do a movie. I feel like everyone's story is so interesting and so unique. I think we, as people who learn through story, think we can all be better at telling our stories even in a small way. If you're a small way better at understanding why you are telling your story, you'll make telling your story that much more interesting to you and to whomever you tell it to. So I take a lot of my students through process, how to do that, where that comes from, and it's those things. It's things that good actors do every single day. But the acting profession has been so watered down to this, moving model that the process of being an actor hasn't really been investigated and talked about too much anymore. It used to be, but nowadays it's just kind of this thing of, oh, you're pretty, you should be an actor. It's just like, no, actors are paid to not be pretty. We're here to tell a story that you might not want to hear and make that real. So there's a driver behind everybody and everyone's motivation to do their thing and to tell their story.
But have you really thought this through, Ahmed? Because you've got 3 albums to produce. You've got a play starting on November 10th. You've got a podcast series. You've got everything else going on in your career, and you've got a wife, by the way, and a child as well. And now you're going to write a book as well. Have you really thought this through?
Yeah. You know how it works? Deadlines. You put deadlines on everything. If you get a deadline, right, then see, this is why I'm a futurist. You look at the future and you say, this day in the future, I will be finished. And then you really, very pedantically, very unfun, boringly put together a schedule that you can follow. And that's what I do. So hopefully, sometimes I don't meet deadlines, but most of the time I do. So yeah, in the world of polymath organization, deadlines.
Well, I have got one more thing for you, and you're going to hate me for it, but I feel like it's almost a tradition when we chat on these Skype, Google Hangouts, FaceTime. I'm sure other formats are available as well. It's tradition that I perhaps annoy you by getting you to do stuff, but I wondered if you could bring official closure to the canon closure by reading that little passage from the book that we discussed earlier.
Let me see the
Chuck
passage.
Wendig's novel, Star Wars Aftermath, Empire's End. I've not read the book, but apparently a character called Marpo comes across Jar Jar, and I believe back on Naboo.
Yes. Already I see text mistakes. Jar Jar would never refer to himself in the third person. So I will change it. I will use artistic license as an actor.
Go for it.
Okay. Misa making some mistakes, the Gungan says, explaining why he isn't wanted anywhere either. This is he's in Naboo. Misa think I helped the Empire. He stares into the distance, suggesting he knows more than he's saying.
It's over. Closure. How does it feel? Closure.
That's good. I still wanted to die. I still wanted to find a dagger in the back, very, Shakespearean kind of an ending. But yeah, this is cool.
This will do for now. Maybe something else. Someone else will buy Star Wars eventually. It's kind of sad. It's if this is the real ending for Jar Jar, it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. It's very sad. I like it.
But it's not a dagger in the back as you would probably prefer.
I want to jump off something.
But maybe that's to come. That's a future novel, perhaps.
Maybe it's just Snoke throwing them off.
Oh, you've just started. The comments now will be flooding through. But thank you very, very much, Ahmed. As always, cheers, mate.
Thank you so much, man. Always.
I'll see you next time, I guess. Episode 4, that'll be.
Sir. Dun, dun, dun.
Take it easy, mate. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out Ahmed's podcast, link in the description, and you can also see our previous chats as well.